What do you get when you combine the cries of 1,000 Lilith fans and this daily? You get a very fun run, and you see we're playing as Lilith, and we basically have 7 familiars alongside us. This is probably like the wet dream if you're used to playing as Lilith, and I've been missing something like that. I definitely think that this should be some form of a challenge, just to maybe showcase just how fun it can really be to just play with a lot of familiars. Obviously, I think we have something like that, but I think in that particular case you can't use your regular tiers, and you know, that's not fun, because a lot of the synergies don't work, but with Lilith I think it works so much better, because not only do you have Incubus, but even if you do pick up those items which usually wouldn't work with your familiars, they work just amazingly with Incubus, and that's great. I love this idea, I love this daily, give me more dailies like these, please, and maybe this is just a good way to break the monotony of some of these dailies that have been happening recently. It hasn't been going too well, at least score-wise it's been going well, but fun-wise, I would say that I've been definitely lacking a really good run, and in this case, getting 6 familiars right out of the bat on Lilith just allows me to experience what I've always wanted to experience. It's quite funny because I've played Lilith so many damn times, I have never had more than a few familiars at a time, which I would consider fun or good, and just the ability to start out with them and just really devastate enemies as soon as you enter the room is an experience unlike no other, and this is one of those dailies which you can't replay because obviously it's a special daily. It's seeded, but it's not seeded in the sense that if you do play this seed, you're not gonna get the same outcome or at least the same items that you get if you would have just played the daily in the first place. So what's there to talk about? There's really not much strategy. We're basically just going from room to room trying to kill enemies as fast as possible, and I'm trying to kinda keep in tandem here. I'm not necessarily looking to get rid of Box of Friends, but if there's gonna be a better item, I'm definitely gonna replace it. And the main reason for that is that there is a limit on how many familiars you can have, and if you have something above a certain amount of familiars, even when you double them, you're not gonna gain anything in return. I don't know what for sure that limit is. It might have been raised in Afterbirth Plus. I've never actually tested it, but for that reason I decided to ditch my Box of Friends, even though initially I didn't intend to. But when you realize that you would only use it twice or maybe 3 times in boss rush and you would be capped, I think in that case it's just much better to pick up something like Book of Shadows, which not only allows you to go in there and really do damage with your offensive orbitals, it also allows you to kind of set up your familiars just in the right pattern so you can deal and deal damage to enemies much more efficiently. And this is what I was kind of going for when I decided to pick that up. What's maybe the greatest thing about this daily, not only do you just have this dream run as Lilith, but you also have all of the treasure rooms, and not only treasure rooms, a lot of the shops that I've gotten here were actually have proven to be quite useful. Maybe the treasure rooms weren't maybe particularly good, or maybe even items, and Devil Deals definitely sucked, but what I really liked about it is that we got all of the items which I would expect on a run like this, and I think this is one of those cases where it's just fun to get something like Big Protector, or a Big Fan, or maybe Headless Baby, or any other familiar which usually you wouldn't be maybe too excited to see, but in this case they're just stacking, and every time you pick up a familiar it just adds it to the line of the familiars that follow you and just deal more damage. The possibilities are endless. There's really no way to go wrong. Whenever you see a new familiar, you pick it up and you just kind of have a lot more fun with it. And of course with Abel and all of the new items that we picked up so far, you can imagine that now if it has the Box of Friends now, when we duplicated it, we would reach our limit of maximum familiars much faster. So I think I was right in my decision to ditch it, and having a Book of Shadows in a case like this has actually proved to be quite useful, because it's a 3-room charge. Book of Shadows is one of those items that just shines in a lot of situations. Not only can you use it defensively or maybe for utility, don't maybe enter curse rooms or maybe go over spikes or anything like that, but using it offensively has to be one of its biggest strengths, because with Mom's Knife and with 2 orbitals, which essentially deal a lot of damage whenever you come into contact with enemies, just allows you to really utilize and maximize it to its full potential. Because this run goes to Isaac, not Troll, but the Cathedral. We have a few options to make, or at least I think we have a very neat decision that we will have to take into account when we actually get to the Void. So do we go to the Void when we beat Hush, or do we go to the Cathedral? And I argued for the longest time that I think it's more worth it to go for the Cathedral in the average case scenario, and I still stand by that. I think that if you just take it in tandem, what's gonna happen is you will get more points on average if you do go to the Cathedral, or at least if there is a person who's gonna go to the Cathedral on a particular daily and you're gonna go to the Void, and if there was gonna be something like a Sacrifice Room, they're gonna be ahead of you. And I always kind of advertise those options which maybe are less likely but will net you with more points, because that essentially means how you're gonna get on top and get a really good score in the end. But in this particular case, and some others, I've been kind of debating my strategy, and I definitely think that in some cases it's just better to go to the void, and not only necessarily because you're gonna get more points for going there. I would say in most cases it's gonna turn out that you're gonna get more points for going that way. So not in the average case, so to say, but in most dailies. The point is that in those dailies where you do go to the dark room after Shoal or the Cathedral, you're gonna get so many more points than if you were go to the void. Then on average I think it would be worth it. Again, I've never done the math, it is just my speculation, but in this particular case I decided to go to the void for the simple reason that there's options. With there's options we can essentially fight every single boss and get 2 items offered to us, and with that we can get a ton of really useful items, some of the bomb items which would increase our consumables, but maybe what we're looking for is something like a Forget Me Now. Obviously the odds of that happening are quite low, but you can imagine that if someone did get their hands on a Forget Me Now in the void, the points that they would get would be just absolutely ridiculous, and they would be ahead of the ball curve by so far that you would have no chance to catch them. And with those options we can essentially double our chances, or maybe even increase them even further to actually find that particular item. And like I said, there are other useful items that I would take into account as well, but this is just maybe the first one that springs to mind. The other decision, maybe a very minor one, is that I had a bomb bag. I think I got it later on, and I also had BOGO bombs, which means that it's just naturally better for me to go a floor which has more rooms, because that means I'm gonna get more bombs in return, and that means also I'm gonna get more points on average for just exploring and kind of going around. And I definitely think that was a good decision in this particular case, although I wouldn't advise it to maybe do it in every daily if you're just concerned for score. One of the things I do mention as well is that I'm trying to break a little bit of the monotony of Isaac. That's not to say I'm bored with the game or anything like that, it's just that a lot of dailies actually devolve into pretty much the same strategy, and going to the void every now and then I think is a good distraction from just your usual daily, and because I tend to do it so rarely, it does really feel like a special occasion when it happens. One of maybe of the most controversial decisions I might have made on this particular run is taking Mom's Knife as Lilith. Obviously with the Incubus it doesn't work very well, it's quite hard to aim, and because you really rely on your knife dealing the most damage at the apex of its arc, or maybe when you throw it out, when it sticks to the enemy for just those a few brief frames, that's when you're gonna deal the most damage to enemies. And in this case you can't really do that, obviously, because you can't really control your Incubus very well, and because of that it's hard to actually land the knife on enemies properly, and also because the sprite is smaller, maybe it's a bit harder to hit because of the collision boxes, but I would say that's a minor thing at best. With how it's structured, I think it's very important to realize that even though Mom's Knife might not necessarily be good on Lilith, I would still say it's just much better than having nothing at all. The ability that not only do we have 5 other familiars which are essentially helping us shoot and thin out the enemies that we're kinda killing, Mom's Knife is just amazing against bosses, and I would argue that if you don't have a box of friends, this is where you're gonna struggle the most, and that's probably the reason why I took it. Without box of friends I really can't rely on box of friends to just deal to deal a lot of damage to bosses. I would much rather have one stationary passive item, and then of course I would be able to take something else, like Book of Shadows in my case, and that would just allow me to deal with enemies a lot faster. Maybe the unsung hero of why Mom's Knife I think is very, very good is the fact that you can kill Hush extremely quickly. Mom's Knife is probably the best killer for Harsh. You can essentially kill them in less than 30 seconds if you aim well. It kinda depends on RNG a bit, but I would say that you can usually kill them in under a minute and a half without too much danger to yourself. And obviously, like I said before, we also have other familiars to kinda rely on. Even if we do miss our knife, we can thin out those enemies in the rooms by relying on those instead. And I think that this strategy, or at least this decision, has actually paid off quite significantly in this particular run, and I'm somewhat proud to have made it. I usually wouldn't condone picking up items like this because I think they tend to be detrimental if you're not used to them, of course. But in this case, I definitely think this was the right decision. So maybe I'm really interested how your run evolved or maybe changed from there. I know there was a tech axe that I could have picked up, and I'm not against tech axe, but I just thought I would stick with Mom's Knife to maybe prove a point that you can do it. That Mom's Knife sometimes can even be on par with tech axe, even though I think that tech axe is a much more superior item. In the end, we did finish the run in a very, very comfortable spot. 21st, I think something like top 15 in the grid, but after without the cheaters. Our expression bonus is relatively high, pretty high. Our damage penalty is only 2000, so I didn't get hit at all, thanks to Book of Shadows and the Holy Mantle trinket, which gives you the Holy Mantle effect for a room. And our time penalty and our item penalty also wasn't too hard. You might say time penalty, I mean item penalty is 1,000, but you have to remember that we started out with 6 items. If you got something like the clicker, maybe we could have reduced that, but in the end it doesn't really matter, because I assume most people already have something like 600, so picking up those few extra items isn't gonna impact our score too much. Overall, 46,000 for a run that goes to the cathedral, pretty decent. Obviously, if we broke the game, there was a blank card I could have picked up at some point. Maybe I could have found a Jera, maybe I could have done that, but I decided to opt to not go for that strategy, just because I think that while blank card is fun, and obviously I think it's a much superior item to Book of Shadows, one of the maybe unfortunate things that happened is that I got Little Bag in this run, which just turns every single card into a pill, and because of that I figured that I'm not gonna have a lot of chances to find more cards or runes, and so I decided to stick with Book of Shadows, and I definitely think the decision has paid off. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.